Today, we're talking about if the Chicago Bulls should be interested in trading for center Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings. Next, we're going to be talking about some other centers that the Chicago Bulls might be interested in trading for this season. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Mazzella's slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about if the Chicago Bulls should be interested in trading for Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings. And so to be clear, before we jump into this, this is just a trade rumor. It's not like the Sacramento Kings and the Chicago Bulls have had any talks, or at least I haven't read anything or saw anything that suggests that. This is just simply a rumor, much like what we heard around Anthony Davis and that noise, and then also too, just the noise around Giannis over the summer. And so I got a chance to see this on Bleacher Nation. This is written by Elias Schuster. And so this is a terrific piece. You get a chance to see what Elias Schuster is thinking about if the Bulls were to go out and possibly explore, going and getting Sabonis. And so again, a great read there. But more importantly, we get a chance to see exactly where the rumblings are coming from. And so this comes from NBA insider Jake Fisher on the Stein line. And so to be clear about that, if you want to check that out, you need to head over to the Substack. It is behind a paid wall. And so within this article on Bleacher Nation, he takes a little piece out of the article that Jake Fisher wrote. And so this is what he had to say. And so paraphrasing this just a little bit, but it says that I've heard from more than a few rival executives who have noted Vooch's trade-friendly contract plus the other expiring deals on Chicago's books, which has led them to wonder out loud about the Bulls' Lithuanian GM Artūras Karnišovičius pursuing Sabonis. Similar curiosity about the Bulls as a potential suitor to try to bring Davis back to his native Windy City is also circulating. And so, what I like about that is just really that last part where it says similar, to the Anthony Davis stuff. And so again, very much, just rumblings, just a little noise and everything else. And so that leads us to just really, the big question here. If this is a thing, should the Chicago Bulls be interested in trading for Sabonis? And so I think to break this down, we'll start with the positives. We'll look at the negatives, and then I'll give my thoughts as far as just should the Chicago Bulls do this, along with maybe some other players that the Bulls might want to take a look at. And so starting with the positives here, the first thing that you get with Sabonis is that you get younger. And so that does check the box with what AK is looking for with this roster. He wants to get younger. And so, not to take anything away from Vooch, he's 35, which is still not old. But, if you're trying to get your roster a little bit younger, then Sabonis certainly fits that for you because Sabonis is 29. And so you check the box there. The next thing with Sabonis is the experience factor. And so that's something that AK has said as well. He wants younger players that have had some experience. And so with Sabonis, he was part of just really this Kings revamped roster, right? Because remember Mike Brown, when he was coach of the year, you had De'Aaron Fox out there and they were playing some good ball. Kevin Huerter was on that team and everything else. And Sabonis was very much, a big piece of that roster. And I mean, he still is, even though the Kings have had their ups and downs and things like that. But more importantly, you get a player that's experienced. And I think that when it comes down to experience, that can be much bigger than stats, because I think that when you have players that, have won or they've been, further than, players that, they're coming to the roster and they're going to be around, then I think that that impacts them. So guys that haven't been there before, you get a chance to learn from a guy like Sabonis. And so I think that that also checks the box there. Now, next, when you talk about his offensive fit, I think Sabonis and the offensive fit, it's perfect as far as running up and down the court. I think that you will get, very much that from Sabonis, because this is a guy that will run, baseline to baseline, not just on offense, but defense as well, which we'll talk about that in a moment. And so, you have the chance of him, possibly beating the opposing center down the floor. He's also going to be a guy that can catch lobs. And I like the fact that he's the type of guy that he will finish in contact. He will go right at the chest of a guy, and he will try to go over the top of a guy. And so I love that about Sabonis, is that he will attack the basket. And so another thing that I like with him offensively is he has a little bit of a handle. Now, it's not anything that's spectacular, but he will put the basketball on the floor and he can go right around a person. He also, too, knows how to go ahead and get the dribble to where he can kind of set it up to where he can get to the back down, or he can create the space to get a good pass, which that is another thing that he does check off too for you offensively. When you're talking about trying to play in pace, in space, Sabonis can do that. Like, he can play that up tempo. He can find guys off the back cut. Like, he's a willing passer at the top of the key. He can get it at the corner spot, the 3-point line, stuff like that. Like, he can make all those passes and he can handle the basketball, in these kind of pick and pop situations, dribble handoffs. So he can do all that. So you're not going to miss anything there. And then I do like the fact that if you do go down to him, on the post, he does have like a little bit of a hook shot that he can go to and stuff like that. And so it's not the best post-up game, but he has something down there. So I do like that with him. And this is a guy that will hit the boards. And so when you look at the numbers for Sabonis, look, the numbers are solid for him. And so right now, at the time of this recording, he's averaging 17.2 points per game. That's a little bit down from last season. Now, he has missed a little time this season due to a knee injury, which we'll talk about that here in a second. But he's averaging 1.2 steals a game, 0.2 with the blocks, 3.7 with the assist, and 12.3 rebounds. And that's with 8.9 on the defensive rebounds. And so a great job there. And then, with the free throws, you wish they were a little bit better. He's shooting 72.5 this season. He's 72.9 for his career. For his career, 3-point shooting wise, 34.4. He's only shooting 20% this season and 51% from the field. He's 55.9 for his career. And so solid numbers for Sabonis. Like, I think that those are all positives. Now, when it comes down to the negatives about not modest, but with Sabonis, and the things that I think about with him is just really, first, it's going to be defensively. Are we necessarily going to get the presence that we're looking for? Because I think that if you're trading for him, you're looking for somebody that is going to give you a little bit more of the interior type of defense, maybe a little bit more of a rim protector. And so you're not necessarily getting that with him. In fact, just looking at the numbers, if we're just looking at block shots, and I know, playing defense is a lot more than block shots, but I do think that that is some of the issues that this team has, is just trying to get these block shots and getting this rim protection. And so right now, currently leading the Bulls is Domantas Sabonis with 1.4 blocks a game. Second behind him is Kevin Huerter with 0.9. And then when you look at Vooch, he would probably be replacing him. And so he's averaging just 0.4 this season. And so when you look at Sabonis and his numbers, he's only averaged 0.5 for his career. Right now, he's at 0.2. And last season, he was at 0.4. And so he's really not the guy that is going to give you like elite, shot blocking at the rim. Now, is he going to give you some physicality where you're not just going to back him down? Absolutely. He will give you that type of physical presence. I will give you that. I think maybe Vooch maybe struggles with that at times for sure, but you do get a little bit more foot speed defensively as well, but you're not going to just get elite shot blocking. And so that's number one. And that's like one of the negatives I think that you'd have to look at with making this type of deal. And number two, when you're talking about him on defense, yes, he's going to give you a little bit of physicality. Is he going to be a guy that maybe generates more steals for you in the game? I'm not sure if he necessarily does that, because I think that that's also like another key is like, is he going to help you generate some more steals? Now, I will say, if you're comparing it to Vooch, he's only averaging 0.6 right now in his in this season for his steals. When you look at Sabonis, Right now, he's averaging 1.2, which is actually tying his career best. And so, okay, I'll give you that he does, generate a little bit more from the steal standpoint, but I'm not sure it's going to be enough to really move the needle there defensively. And so that's another thing that you have to think about with Sabonis. And then, when it comes down to also just the contract situation and the situation with him with the injury. And so right now he's dealing with a partial meniscus tear. So he is expected back, but I don't like it when you're talking about like tears and stuff like that with the knee and stuff like that. So that's number one. You'd have to think about that. But he's owed, a pretty good amount of change. And so when you look at the contract right now, comparatively speaking to what you're going to be losing here with Vooch, because remember, it's talked about as, hey, that is a very team-friendly type of contract that Vooch is on, because it absolutely is. And so when you see it, Vooch is making just the 21 million here this season, 21 and some change. But you look at Sabonis, look, he is due 42.3 million for the next 3 years. And so also too, when I looked this up on Spot Track, it actually looks like that the contract will go up some more. And so it looks like that it goes from about 42 up to 45 to 48 by the last year of his contract before he goes into unrestricted free agency when he's 32 there. And so, that's something to think about. Another thing, just looking at this is that the Kings are currently at that first apron as well. And so we know how tricky the aprons can be. And so I think that that's another thing that you have to think about when trading for Sabonis. And so overall for me, I'm kind of out on a Sabonis trade, because I think that really what it comes down to is that if you trade off Vooch for Sabonis, I feel like that it's more of just like a lateral pickup. Like, I don't think that this is anything that puts the team like forward. Like, I don't think that it necessarily pushes you there. Like, I think that even with Sabonis there, I'm still looking for my center of the future. Like, and I think that that means that, I might be looking to move Sabonis again, probably very shortly, because I'm looking for somebody that is going to be, my foundational piece, that is going to be a person that can lock down defensively and also to give me what I need on the offensive end. And so I think that you get some of that with Sabonis. And then you have to think about the fact that, look, he doesn't stretch the floor like Vooch, but then, also too, he does some other stuff like Vooch, but it's not anything that's like, it jumps off the page for me. And so I think that you invest a little bit more as far as your financials there too as well. And so you have to think about that, like you're kind of jumping into, more money on the contract. And then also too, what is it going to take from a draft capital standpoint to get Sabonis over? I'm not interested in giving up my future for just the short term. And so that's another reason why. And then also too, when you look at just really what you have already, you're going to have Zach Collins coming back. I think that Jalen Smith is playing some good basketball. You only have 1 year left with Vooch. And so I think that you maybe just ride this out a little bit more and be patient and see what you have out there. Because again, just going back to a point that I made, it's not like Sabonis is going to give you, just another defender out there that's like an Isaac Okoro or like a Patrick Williams or like a Ayo Dosunmu, like an elite defender at that position. Because like I said, I think that this team needs some more, elite defensive efforts inside. Like, you need to get you somebody that can play defense inside and also too can make it happen, on the offensive side of the ball inside as well. And so I just don't think that Sabonis is necessarily going to check that box. But I will say this, AK has options. This front office has options because, like it's mentioned in that piece, you do have some expiring contracts with Kevin Huerter. You still have a guy like Zach Collins, which we just mentioned. He's playing pretty well. I think he's going to come back and he's going to be an impact for this team, which is going to raise his trade value. And so, you very much have the option to move these players. And I think that, some teams are going to give you some pieces. Now, if the Bulls are willing to move off of Kobe White, which again, I'm not in that camp of moving Kobe White and Ayo, certainly that's going to attract some teams as well. And I just think that if the Bulls are going to make like a short-term move for a center, maybe you should start to look at a guy like Daniel Gafford. I think that he's a player that I would be interested in if you're talking about like a short-term move, because one, you're getting a guy that can be, a rim protector there. You're getting a guy that can get your rebounds. He does fit your offense in the sense that he's going to be, a lob threat. Is he going to necessarily stretch the floor? No, but if you're talking about somebody that's just the short term, and also too, somebody that he can go along with the potential of getting, you're just cornerstone at the center position, hopefully via draft, I would say. Yeah, I mean, he's a perfect fit for that. Like, I think that you get him at a cost-effective contract, and I think it's something that you can continue to build with. Unlike Sabonis, like, I think that eventually you do move off of that. And so, not to take anything away from him, but that's where I'm at with it. I think some other players that the Bulls might, maybe, or I should say take a look at would be a Nick Richards. I've said that before with him over at Phoenix. I've said Mark Williams, if he could stay healthy, I think he's a guy. Heck, I'd even say even a guy that's a little bit older that's making far less, like a Bobby Portis. I think he still could give you some value here offensively and especially defensively when you're talking about like the intensity level that he would bring to the roster. Like, I would like to see something like that, but I'm not willing to give up a whole bunch of draft capital, to get into something like that. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, should the Chicago Bulls be looking to add a guy like Sabonis? Again, I think that it's more so just a lateral kind of move if you're moving off Vooch for him. And again, just looking at the money and the finances here, that is going to be a bit tricky when you're talking about going out and getting him. I think that this is something where the Bulls would probably have to include another team. And I just think that, look, you've just gotten to a situation where your finances are good as far as the books. Then also too, you have control of your draft picks and things like that. And I really do think that if the Bulls are looking to address the center position or they're looking to get better inside, I think it's probably going to come, really from the NBA draft. Now, there is the chance that you can get a nice little piece, like I said, with a Daniel Gafford. Maybe you're not giving up too much. Maybe you can get a Nick Richards. Maybe you can get a Bobby Portis over there. But again, I think that is just a piece. But I think that you are still going to need to go out there and get your center of the future out there. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.